Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dr. Creepy. In tonight's video, we dive into 8 most disturbing, true, Alaskan small-town horror stories. Chilling encounters that prove the coldest places in America are never as quiet or as empty as they seem. From frozen villages near the Brooks Range to fishing towns buried in snow along the Bering Sea, these stories reveal the terrifying side of Alaska that outsiders rarely hear about. Locals, night shift workers, hunters, and isolated residents share the moments when an ordinary winter night turned into something they still can't explain. Strange footprints that end in the middle of empty tundra, lights circling frozen lakes in perfect silence, voices echoing from abandoned Cold War tunnels, figures watching from blizzards with no tracks leading to them, and creatures moving inside the walls of old cabins when the temperature drops far below zero. If you're new here, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new true horror stories. Now get comfortable and let's start. I grew up in a place most people don't believe is real when I describe it. A dot on the map in western Alaska, wedged between miles of white silence and mountains that look like they're leaning forward to listen. Population: 200 on a good day, 150 when winter starts killing the weak and driving the restless south. We didn't even have a name worth putting on a postcard. Locals just called it the Edges because that's what it felt like the whole town sat right on the edge of something you weren't supposed to look down into. My family ran the only small supply shop and mail hub in town. I worked nights sometimes, especially in winter when planes stopped coming and snow machines got stuck, and everyone depended on us to stay open long enough to trade gossip or borrow gas or ask if we had more kerosene. I didn't mind the hours, the dark didn't bother me. Out here, you get used to it. The dark becomes its own weather. But the night it happened, the night the man walked out of the blizzard, the darkness felt heavy in a way I had never felt before, like it was holding its breath. It was late January, and we were in the middle of a storm that had been crawling across the tundra for 2 days. Winds were screaming against the siding hard enough to rattle the shelves. The windows were frosted so thick you could barely see the glow of the street lamp outside. A whiteout. That's what the Weather Channel would have called it if anyone around here got cable. But there's a difference between a whiteout and what we had. Whiteouts are storms. What we had felt like a mouth swallowing the town whole. I was about to close early when I heard it. A sound that didn't match the storm. A dull, rhythmic thudding coming from somewhere outside the front door, like someone was knocking on the wall instead of the wood. No one should have been out there. No one could have been out there. I walked to the window, rubbed the frost off with my sleeve, and looked through the glass. At first, I thought the storm was playing tricks on me. The snow was whipping so hard that shapes twisted and disappeared in seconds. But then something broke the pattern. A figure, tall, unmoving, standing just beyond the porch lights, half buried in snow that was falling too fast and too thick to even form drifts. He wasn't walking. He wasn't staggering like someone lost in the storm. He was just standing, facing the store. I felt an instinctive fear, deep, cold, older than logic, pulling at the back of my throat. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then he raised his hand, slow, mechanical, and started knocking again, this time on the window glass. I jerked back. His face was covered in frost. Ice coated his eyebrows, his beard, his eyelashes. His skin looked bloodless, chalky, but his eyes, they were dark, too dark, like looking into the open end of a gun barrel. No reflection, no emotion, just fixed on me, like he had been waiting for me specifically. I forced myself to unlock the door and pull it open a few inches, enough for my voice to carry out. "You okay? You lost?" The wind immediately tore the words out of my mouth. The man didn't answer. He stepped forward, crossing from the darkness into the buzzing yellow porch light, and that's when everything inside me went cold. There were no footprints behind him. Not a single one. Fresh snow was coming down, sure, but the way he moved, the distance he had covered, there should have been something. I could see the flakes hitting the ground behind him and piling up just fine. But he left nothing. No indentations, no disturbance. It was like he hadn't walked to the store. It was like he had appeared at the edge of the light. He stepped inside without being invited, tracking clumps of ice onto the floor. Except they weren't melting. The frost on his clothes didn't even glisten from the heat. It just clung to him like it was part of his skin. "I need the house," he said. His voice sounded wrong, like each word was being forced through a throat that hadn't spoken in years. "What house?" I asked. He lifted his head, and the frost cracked across his cheeks like a broken mask. "The house that used to be here," he replied, "before the fire." Fire. A shiver crawled up my neck. A house had burned down here once, decades ago, long before I was born. I'd only heard the story from old-timers who talked about it with a mixture of anger and superstition. A man had fallen asleep drunk with a kerosene heater tipped too close to the wall. The house went up fast. They said he died before they even got the door open. "So you knew the family?" I asked carefully. The man stared at me with those impossible dark eyes. "I lived there." I felt my stomach drop. He didn't look old enough. The fire had been in the early 80s, and even if he had been alive then, the clothing he wore didn't match anything from that time. His jacket looked like something handmade, the stitching uneven, the buttons mismatched, like pieces scavenged from different decades. "You sure you're talking about the right place?" I asked, stalling for time, because something about his presence made my skin feel too tight. He nodded once. "The house with blue windows," he said, "the one with the apple tree in the yard." My heart thumped hard. That detail wasn't public. The tree had burned too. Only people who'd lived here back then, or people who'd seen it, would know. I asked him to wait while I checked something. I walked into the back room and grabbed the old town map pinned to the corkboard. I wasn't sure why. Maybe to prove he had the wrong place. Maybe to reassure myself that this was a normal situation with a normal explanation if I just tried hard enough. But when I returned to the front of the shop, he was gone. The door hadn't opened. The bell hadn't rung. The snow on the floor was untouched. The frost clinging to him never melted. And now it wasn't anywhere on the ground either. He had just vanished. I locked the door, killed the lights, and drove home shaking hard enough that I kept drifting toward the ditch. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Every noise outside, every groan of the house in the wind, made my heart slam against my ribs. 2 days later, when the storm finally passed, I drove to the spot where the house had been before the fire. Nothing remained but a flat depression in the snow, a place where the earth looked slightly darker. Locals said the ground never froze completely there. Heat memory, trauma soaked into the soil. Whatever reason, the snow always seemed thinner. When I got out of my truck, I saw them. Footprints, leading from the tree line straight toward the clearing. The exact shape of boots, except the prints were filled with ice, like something had stepped down with such cold intensity that the snow had frozen solid beneath the pressure. The prints stopped right in the center of the clearing, and there, pressed deep into the ice, was a knee print, as if something had knelt. The same kneeling shape that locals sometimes claimed to see behind the general store in deep winter. The same outline people pretended not to talk about. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the wall while the wind pushed against the windows. Somewhere outside, I thought I heard that same slow knocking again. 3 dull, evenly spaced thuds. I didn't go to the door. I didn't look out the window. I just stayed completely still until the sound stopped. But something changed after that storm. People in town began seeing a figure standing at the edge of the light during nighttime. Tall, frost-covered, watching. Never moving, no footsteps left behind, no tracks leading up to it. And when the wind got bad, sometimes, just sometimes, you'd hear a voice carried through the white noise saying, "I lived here. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what it's looking for. But I do know one thing. Every time the blizzard comes back, every time the world outside turns into a swirling white wall, I feel like the town is getting closer to whatever he's trying to show us, or warn us about. And sometimes when the temperature drops far enough, the frost on my windows forms a shape, a face, silent, staring inside, waiting for me to open the door. I grew up in a place where the winters feel older than the land itself. The kind of cold that doesn't just sting your skin. It soaks into your bones, settles behind your heartbeat, and makes you feel like you're living inside someone else's dream or nightmare. Depends on the night. Depends on the wind. Our town sat beside a frozen lake almost year-round, a flat white sheet ringed with black spruce and mountains that never stopped shedding snow. The lake didn't have an official name. Maps labeled it unnamed body, like it wasn't even worth acknowledging. Locals just called it Stillwater, but not because the water was calm, because nothing on that lake ever moved unless it wanted to. I learned that the hard way. It started one night when I was 16. Winter break, dead of December, when boredom and snowdrifts were equally deep. A couple of friends, Caleb and Jonah, came by my house long after dark, pounding on my door with that frantic energy teenage boys always have when they're either excited or scared and don't want to admit which. "Come on," Caleb hissed when I cracked the door open. "You've got to see this." "What?" I asked, pulling my jacket over my shoulders. "Someone crash a snow machine again?" "Just get your boots," Jonah said. His face was pale in the porch light, not scared yet, but unsettled. I didn't like that look on him. He was the kind of kid who laughed at moose charges and climbed on roofs during windstorms. We walked down the hill behind my house and followed the narrow trail that cut through the trees. Snow was falling in soft, slow flakes, barely disturbed by the wind. Every breath steamed white and vanished immediately. The night was quiet in that unnerving Alaskan way, like the world had hit pause. When the trail opened to Stillwater, I saw what they meant. Lights. 4 of them. Pale blue orbs floating just a few feet above the ice, drifting in a slow circle like they were tethered to a string no one could see. They glowed with a cold, almost electric shimmer, casting faint reflections on the frozen lake. "What the hell?" I breathed. "They were moving faster earlier," Caleb whispered, "like chasing each other." "They're not drones?" I asked. "Dude," Jonah scoffed, "there's nobody in this town smart enough to fly a drone in a snowstorm." He wasn't wrong. The lights pulsed faintly, brightening and dimming like something breathing. I stepped forward until my boots reached the edge of the lake. The ice beneath the snow was slick black glass, strong enough to drive a truck over in midwinter. People fish out there, play hockey, cut through on foot to shave half a mile off the walk to school. But the way those lights were circling, it made the lake feel like a completely different place. "Let's go out there," Jonah said suddenly. "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." "Come on," he insisted. "They're just lights." "Lights doing what?" I shot back. "There's no source, no noise, they're not attached to anything." "So they're auroras or something." "Auroras don't hover 10 feet off the ground like balloons." He smirked at me, scared to walk on your own lake, and stepped onto the ice before I could grab him. The lights reacted instantly. All 4 stopped moving, just froze in place like someone hit a switch. Then, one by one, they turned toward him, not drifted, not rotated, turned, like each orb had a front, a face. I grabbed Jonah's arm and yanked him backward so hard he slipped and hit the ground. Caleb swore and backed away. The lights didn't move, didn't blink, didn't resume their circle. They just hovered there, all 4 facing us, as if analyzing us. A long, slow hum rolled across the ice. We all heard it, felt it, a low vibration in our jaws, like the sound was coming from inside our bones. "Let's leave," I said quietly. "Now." We ran the entire way home, and none of us talked about it again until after Christmas. Not because we forgot, because we didn't want to believe it had happened. But the lights weren't finished with us. A week later, I spotted them again, this time from my bedroom window around 2 in the morning. They were farther apart, drifting not over the lake, but near the tree line behind the school. Except something was different. There were 5 now. Slow, hovering, blue-white spheres gliding silently between the trees. Every time one passed behind a spruce trunk, the branches cast sharp, unnatural shadows across the snow, like the lights were brighter than they appeared from a distance. One of the lights glided toward the lake, and then stopped dead the moment it crossed onto the ice, as if hitting an invisible wall. It hovered there, twitching slightly, not shaking. Twitching. Like someone was tugging on it from opposite directions. Then it darted straight down. Not fast. Instant. One moment it hovered, the next it vanished beneath the ice without leaving a hole. I stumbled back from the window so hard I hit the wall. My breath froze in my throat. Something was under the lake. Something solid enough for the lights to move around. Something deep enough that the ice wasn't even disturbed. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I biked to school and almost crashed into a cluster of people gathered near the frozen shoreline. Someone had found cracks in the ice, long, jagged fractures shaped like claw marks, not straight lines from stress, not a break from temperature changes. They curved inward, as if something underneath had scraped its way toward the surface. A teacher tried to rope off the area. Kids took pictures before being yelled away. I couldn't stop staring at the pattern. 4 arcs clawing inward, and then a sharp vertical line leaving the lake like a trail, like something had climbed out or come up to look. Later that week, Caleb asked if I wanted to meet him and Jonah at the lake after dark to see if the lights came back. I told them no. Hard no. We argued. They called me scared. I told them they were idiots. We didn't talk again until the night they went anyway. I woke up to someone pounding on my front door around midnight. It was Caleb, red-faced, crying, barely able to breathe. "He's gone," he gasped. "Who?" "Jonah." My stomach caved in. They'd gone to the lake. The lights had come back, 6 of them this time, circling in a tight spiral above the center. Jonah had stepped onto the ice first, just to get a closer look. The lights paused, turned toward him again. Then all 6 shot upward and spread out like a flock. Caleb said they started moving around Jonah in a widening ring, faster and faster, whipping snow off the ground in a violent funnel. He tried to grab Jonah's jacket to pull him back, but the wind knocked him off balance. When he looked up again, the lights had stopped, frozen in place, and Jonah was gone, just gone. No footprints, no broken ice, nothing but a smooth circular patch of frost, as if something had pressed down hard enough to flatten the snow into glass. Caleb ran for help until he couldn't feel his legs. By morning, the entire town was searching. Snow machines, dogs, volunteers, but there was nothing. No sign of him, no tracks, no clothing, not even a body heat trail. It was like the frozen lake had swallowed him. The official report said he likely fell through weak ice. Bullshit. The spot had been frozen solid since November. People drove trucks over it every winter. That ice wasn't weak. Something took him. Something that used those lights like bait. In the weeks that followed, the orbs kept appearing. Always near the lake. Always after dark. Always watching whoever dared to get close. Some people claimed they heard whispering beneath the ice. Some said the lights were brighter during full moons. Some insisted they saw shapes moving far below the frozen surface. Human silhouettes drifting, swaying, reaching up. I stopped going anywhere near Stillwater. But one night near the end of January, something happened that I still don't understand. I heard tapping outside my window, 3 sharp taps. I thought it was a branch or an animal until I heard a 4th tap, slower, more deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight, walked to the frosted glass, and wiped it clear with my hand. There in the yard behind my house hovered a single blue orb, just one, silent, motionless. And inside it, I swear to God, I saw a face, distorted, pressed from the inside, like someone was trapped behind foggy glass. The mouth was open like screaming, but no sound came through. The shape flickered and shifted. A nose, eyes, and then, for a split second, I saw Jonah, his frozen, contorted face staring at me from inside the light. I staggered back so fast I hit the dresser. By the time I scrambled to the window again, the orb was gone. The snow beneath it was untouched. No footprints, no tracks, no indentation, just perfect, undisturbed winter. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Who would believe me? Half the town already thought grief had broken me, and maybe it had. But the next morning, when I walked outside, something waited in the snow under my window. A shape, carved perfectly into the frost. A handprint, not spread like someone bracing or pushing, reaching, as if something inside the light had touched the ground, or tried to climb out. I haven't been back to Stillwater since. I moved south after graduation and never returned, not even to visit my parents. They think I left because I needed a future, needed opportunity, needed a life outside snow and darkness. But the truth is simpler. I left because the lights weren't done watching me. And every winter since, no matter where I move, no matter how far south I go, I swear I see one of them hovering at the tree line when the nights get long. Silent, cold, waiting to see if I'll come closer. Waiting to see if I'll step onto the ice again. Because whatever is under that lake, it doesn't forget who's seen it, and it doesn't let go. People think Alaska is empty. endless, silent. But that's not true. Silence only means something is listening. Emptiness only means something is waiting. And the snow, especially untouched snow, remembers every single thing that moves across it. Everything. That's why the prints terrified us. My name's Aaron, and I grew up on the northern edge of a fishing settlement, so isolated we didn't get mail for weeks at a time. Most of the year our world was white hills, frozen shores, and the occasional distant shadow of a herd of caribou drifting past like ghosts. You could walk from one end of town to the other in under 15 minutes. Everyone knew each other's dogs, kids, and footsteps. So when the tracks appeared behind my house one morning, I knew immediately they didn't belong to anyone from town. At first, I thought it was a joke. Prank footprints in the snow, kids messing around. But when I stepped off my porch and crouched beside them, the cold air caught in my throat. They weren't shaped like boots, or paws, or hooves. They were long, oval-shaped indentations with something like ridges along the edges, almost like the toes of a bird, but stretched too far. Each step was nearly 4.5 feet apart. Whatever made them walked on 2 legs, not 4. And the snow inside each print wasn't lightly compressed. It was frozen solid, as if the weight or temperature of the creature had flash frozen it on contact. The hair on my arms stood straight up. I followed the tracks with growing dread. They moved between the trees behind my house, down the small slope toward the shoreline. The sun was coming up, a pale red bruise bleeding across the horizon, but it didn't help. The cold felt sharper, the air thinner. The prints didn't wander or meander like an animal sniffing around. They moved in a straight line, purposeful, deliberate. And after about 30 yards, they stopped. Stopped dead. Not because they turned around, not because the snow changed. They just ended. Mid-step. The last print was half-formed, as if the thing had lifted its leg and simply vanished. The snow beyond it was smooth, untouched. No drag marks, no return path, no disturbance, like the creature walked into the air itself and disappeared. I stood there staring at the end of the trail so long the cold seeped through my boots and into my bones. Eventually I backed away slowly, afraid that whatever had made the prints might still be watching me from the trees. I didn't tell anyone at first, not because I didn't want to, because I didn't know how. How do you explain prints that start out of nowhere and end out of nowhere? How do you convince people something walked behind your house when the only evidence looks like a physical impossibility? But someone else saw them before I could decide what to do. That afternoon, Old Man Harrow came banging on my door, face red from cold and fear. "You seen them?" he rasped as soon as I opened the door. "Seen what?" "Tracks." My heart thudded once, heavy. "What tracks?" He pushed his way inside like he was escaping something outside. "They're behind my shed. Same damn kind we found in the 90s, same damn pattern. I told people then and they said I was losing my mind." "What did they look like?" He stared at me, eyes wide. "Long. Wrong. You know damn well the kind I mean." I swallowed. So he had seen them before, decades ago, and someone else was seeing them now. That meant it wasn't a one-time anomaly. It was back. The next few nights, the town buzzed with talk of strange tracks appearing in yards, in alleys, near the school's dumpsters. Always the same shape, long ovals, ridged edges spaced far apart, always frozen solid inside, always stopping without explanation. People started locking their doors earlier. Nobody let their dogs out alone. But the turning point came 3 nights later. Just after midnight, the siren on Harrow's shed blew. It wasn't a real siren, just an old tin alarm bell wired to a motion sensor. He set it up after the last time he swore the thing had come back. Everyone in town hated it. It went off whenever a fox got too close or a snowdrift collapsed. But the sound that night was different. It didn't ring once. It rang in a stuttering, frantic pattern that didn't match wind, animals, or random movement. It sounded like something big was moving around behind his house. I grabbed my coat and ran outside. Other neighbors were already stepping out with flashlights, calling to each other, voices tense in the freezing dark. When I reached the shed, Harrow was standing there in his thick jacket, trembling, one hand gripping a shotgun so tightly his knuckles were white. "It's around back," he whispered. We walked together, slow, terrified, flashlights shaking, until we reached the far side of the shed, and there they were. Fresh prints, too fresh, Steam rose from the snow around them as if something freezing cold had passed by just moments earlier. The prints formed a loose circle around the shed, like whatever it was had been pacing, studying the structure, studying him. The hairs on my neck lifted. Then I noticed something else. A second set of prints, smaller, narrower, not matching the first set. Another creature, or another version of the same thing. Two of them, walking side by side. The tracks moved off into the woods, and this time, they didn't end abruptly. They curved, circled trees, doubled back, looped in strange patterns that almost looked intentional, like a message or a warning. Then the prince stopped again, at the base of Harrow's back steps. He let out a faint, broken sound I'd never heard from him before. "We need to tell the others," he croaked. We did, but nobody wanted to hear it. People came, looked at the prints, argued, speculated. Some tried to measure them. Some laughed nervously, pretending it was some kind of elaborate prank. One guy insisted the prints were a thermal anomaly caused by ground moisture. But the truth was simpler. Everyone was scared, and scared people look for explanations that don't exist. Night after night, the prints kept appearing, sometimes behind homes, sometimes on rooftops, sometimes crossing the main road in clean, impossible lines. And then the real fear began, when the town realized the prints were getting closer to people's windows. First one house, then another, always late at night, always stopping right beneath a bedroom window. Always the same number of prints, 2 sets, side by side, toes pointed toward the house, perfectly still, as if the creatures stood there watching the sleeping person on the other side of the glass. The snow inside the prints froze into crystal patterns, like delicate frost feathers radiating outward. Our town wasn't scared of wolves, or moose, or bears. Alaska teaches you to respect nature, not fear it. But these prints weren't nature. They weren't anything we knew. People started boarding windows, leaving lights on all night, keeping kids inside. Some families fled south and didn't come back, but most of us stayed because deep down we believed staying in groups would keep us safe. We were wrong. One night, everything changed. It was late February, temperatures dropping toward 40 below. I woke to a soft tapping sound at my window. I froze in bed. Tap, 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 slow, even rhythmic. Not wind, not branches. Something knocking. My chest tightened as the tapping continued. 3 more soft knocks. I knew better than to look. But fear can drag you like a hook. I leaned out of bed, pulled back the curtain, and froze solid. 2 dark shapes stood just beyond the glass. Not clear outlines. More like distortions, shifts in the moonlight, tall, narrow, vaguely humanoid, but not shaped correctly. No faces, just impressions, like shadows cast by something not fully in this world. And below them, the prints, right up against the house, close enough that the frost on the glass vibrated with each tap, like the cold from their bodies was pushing against the window. One of the shapes tilted, leaning, watching, though it had no eyes. I stumbled backward, slamming into the dresser so hard a stack of clothes fell to the floor. When I looked again, the shapes were gone, but the prints remained. 2 perfect solid ovals frozen like ice sculptures beneath my window. My breath shook. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I didn't sleep for days. The next morning, I found something in the snow that made my stomach twist, something I hadn't noticed before. Inside one of the prints, embedded in the ice, was a long sliver of something dark. Not wood, not stone. A claw, curved, black as iron, like the talon of a bird, but larger than any eagle, raven, or owl. Longer than my finger, sharper than a knife point. I tried to pick it up. It was frozen solid. I chipped at the ice with a screwdriver until my hands burned from cold. The claw wouldn't budge. It was fused into the ice itself, as if the creature's touch had melted then refrozen the snow instantly around it. I stopped trying. Some things you're not meant to hold. That night, the prints multiply. Half the town woke to find sets of prints everywhere. In yards, driveways, outside windows, leading onto porches, circling sheds, marking rooftops so high, nothing living could have climbed up there without leaving a trail. But the scariest part? There were now 3 sets, 3 creatures, walking together, breathing together if they breathe at all. The next day, people left town in trucks, snow machines, even on foot. Anyone who could leave did, but not everyone. A handful of us stayed out of necessity, or stubbornness. My parents refused to leave the business behind. Harrow swore running meant giving the things permission to follow. I stayed because fear roots you in place as much as it tries to pull you away, and because part of me felt responsible. The prints had started behind my house. If I left, would they follow? Would they hunt the trail south like wolves, or would they vanish back into the snow once their watchers were gone? I didn't know. Nobody did. The final night, I still don't talk about it out loud. The prints came closer than ever. Instead of stopping at windows, they came onto porches, then up steps, then onto thresholds. I heard one of them press against my front door, a soft, cold pressure, like dry ice sliding across wood. Then I heard something else, breathing, but not human breathing. It was hollow, wet, deep, like someone inhaling through a long metal pipe, pulling cold air into a throat that wasn't built for it. I held my breath, stood completely still, every muscle screaming. The breathing stopped. Something sharp clicked against the door. A claw, tapping, slow, deliberate, counted. 1, 2, 3. My vision blurred. I felt myself shake uncontrollably. Then, silence. I waited hours before opening the door. When the sun finally rose, weak and red, I found the prints stretching away from my porch, but not 3 sets, 4. 4 sets of prints. 4 of them, walking away together into the trees, like they'd been waiting for something, or someone, maybe waiting for me. The prints never came back after that night. Nobody knows why. Maybe they got what they wanted. Maybe winter shifting weakened their path. Maybe the arrival of thaw drove them deeper into whatever places they hide. But to this day, I still find myself waking up before dawn, listening for tapping on the glass. Because I know this truth better than I know anything else. The snow remembers everything that touches it. Every shape, every step, every shadow. And those prints, the ones that don't match anything alive, they weren't warnings. They were rehearsals. Because whatever made them is still out there, waiting for winter, waiting for deeper snow, waiting for silence. And one day, when the cold is sharp enough and the night's long enough, they'll walk back into town again. I've lived in small Alaskan towns my whole life, but the one where this happened was the smallest of them all. Barely 80 people, 3 dozen dogs, and more spruce trees than anyone could ever count. We had 1 gas pump, 1 bar, 1 elementary school that doubled as a meeting hall, and 1 general store that kept the whole place running. It was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, but slept with rifles next to their beds because you never knew what might wander out of the woods. I worked as the night clerk at that general store. It wasn't the kind of job you dream about, but it kept me warm, paid for groceries, and gave me something to do besides stare at the dark, which in midwinter lasted almost 18 hours a day. Nights were slow. Sometimes the only sound was the freezer humming or the building creaking as the temperature dropped below 0. But every now and then I'd hear something else. A sound behind the building. A sound like someone crying. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the wind. The wind makes strange noises out here, slipping between the eaves like a mouthful of secrets. But this was different. Softer. Human. A woman's voice, muffled but unmistakably crying. Slow, broken sobs coming from just outside the back wall of the store. I stepped outside with my flashlight. The cold rushed into my lungs like needles. Snow crunched under my boots as I rounded the corner to the back alley. Nothing. Just the storage shed, the dumpster, and a long stretch of darkness. I brushed it off as my imagination. Nights alone do weird things to your head. But the next night, it came back. Same time, same sound. A woman crying softly behind the building. And this time, I heard something else. Whispering. Not words, not clear. Just a low, desperate murmur beneath the sobbing, like someone trying to speak through chattering teeth. I went out again. Again, nothing. The snow behind the store was completely untouched. No footprints, no signs of someone being there, no indentation. Just smooth, perfect white. That's when the fear began settling in. Not the panicked kind, but the slow, deep kind that grows roots in your stomach. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not because I didn't think they'd believe me. Everyone in this town had their own stories about weird things in the winter. But because I didn't want to talk about it. Talking about it made it real. But the crying got worse. Every night it got louder, clearer, closer. And then one night, it wasn't behind the store anymore. It was right outside the back door. I was stocking shelves when I heard the sound. Not distant, not muffled. Right against the metal door, soft weeping, like someone with their forehead pressed to the steel. I froze. Another sound followed, a slow dragging noise, as if something was sliding its hand down the length of the door. Then a whisper, barely audible, "Please help me." The voice was broken, fragile, shaking, like someone freezing to death. Everything in me screamed to ignore it, but habit and instinct took over. People get stranded in storms out here. People get hurt. People get lost. I grabbed my coat and flashlight and unlatched the door. A gust of ice-cold air blasted into the room. But the alley was empty. Completely empty. Except the snow just outside the door had a shape pressed into it. A kneeling shape, perfectly outlined, like someone had been kneeling, crying, facing the door. But there were no footprints leading to it, no tracks leaving it, just a single kneeling outline in the snow, smooth and deep, like a sculpture made in one perfect motion. My chest tightened. For the first time, I felt real fear. Not the vague unease of strange sounds, but something more primitive. Something that told me I shouldn't be outside. I backed into the store and slammed the door shut. The crying didn't return the rest of the night. But the next night, something worse did. Halfway through my shift, the generator flickered. It never went out, it just faltered, the lights dimming to a weak, sickly glow before steadying again. The second it happened, I heard something behind the building. Not crying this time. Breathing. Slow, ragged breathing. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I picked it up, expecting spam, but my blood ran cold when I read it. "Don't go outside." I stared at the message for several seconds, convinced it was a prank. Nobody in this town had my number except my boss and two neighbors. Before I could react, another message came through. "It's right outside the door." My skin crawled. Then a third message. "It's looking for you." That's when the back door handle rattled. Slowly at first, then harder, then with a sustained, shaking force, like someone gripping it with both hands and pulling. I turned away from the door and grabbed the store's landline. We had no police department, just a volunteer constable, an older guy named Frank who lived a block away. He answered on the second ring. "What's going on?" he asked. I told him. Every detail. To my surprise, he didn't dismiss it. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was imagining things. He just said one thing. "Stay behind the counter. I'm coming." The rattling stopped. The breathing faded. But I didn't move. Not even after the front door opened and Frank stepped inside, brushing snow from his beard. He walked around the store, checked the front windows, listened. Then he motioned for me to follow. "We're going out back," he said. Everything in me screamed not to, but I followed him because the only thing worse than going out there alone was letting him walk out alone. He opened the back door. The alley was dead silent, but the kneeling indentation in the snow was still there. And tonight, there were two more, one closer to the wall and one closer to the woods. 3 kneeling shapes, all different sizes, all too deep to be made by a normal person. Frank stared at them, jaw clenched. "You've seen these before," I said quietly. He didn't answer, not for several seconds. Then he exhaled slowly. "They've been coming here since before I was born." A chill crawled up my spine. "What are they?" He kept staring at the snow. "They're the reason this town never grows." "What does that mean?" He looked at me, his eyes tired. "You'll understand soon." I didn't understand, not until the next night. I showed up for my shift just as the sun dipped below the mountains. The sky was clear, the air painfully cold, cold that stings your gums when you breathe. The store was empty for the first 2 hours. Nothing moved outside, but around 11, the crying came back. This time, it was different. It wasn't behind the store, it wasn't outside the door, it was inside the walls. A long, low sob echoed behind the shelves, followed by another and another. Like someone was walking along the wall, dragging their body against it as they cried. I backed away slowly. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my teeth. Then I heard footsteps on the roof. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. The footsteps moved slowly, deliberately, from one end of the building to the other, then stopped directly above me. Snow dust fell from the ceiling tiles, drifting down like fine powder. I stepped backward. The crying stopped. Then a voice whispered right behind me, "Help me." I turned. Nothing. But right where I'd been standing, the floor tiles were frosted over in the shape of a handprint. Long fingers, narrow palm, not shaped like a human hand. I bolted into the office, slammed the door, and locked it. My phone buzzed. Another text. Don't look out the window. Another. It knows you can hear it now. Another. Don't move. Then the office window behind me creaked, the glass tempered under sudden freezing pressure. I couldn't help it. I turned. A face was pressed to the glass. Not a woman's face. Not fully human. Gray skin stretched too tight, hollow eyes pressed against the pane, a mouth open in a silent cry. Frost bloomed around it like a halo. I dropped to the floor. I stayed there until I heard pounding, real pounding, on the front door of the store. Human voices calling my name. I crawled out, shaking uncontrollably, and unlocked the door. Half the town was outside, dragged from their homes by the sound of the store alarm going off. Someone must have tripped it when the roof thing moved. I told them everything. Everything except the face. The face felt personal. After that night, I quit. The next morning, I packed my bags and left town on the supply plane. I didn't go back for my last paycheck. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't tell my parents until I landed 200 miles away. And that night, I got one last text. Unknown number. No message this time. Just a picture, a photo of the back of the general store, taken at night, fresh snow on the ground, and in the snow, 4 kneeling shapes, all facing the back door, as if waiting for me to return. I deleted the number, but to this day, every time I hear crying where no one should be, I remember the sound behind that store, and I remember the face at the window, waiting, watching, calling for me, because I think what stood there that night wasn't asking for help. It was asking for permission, and one day, it might get tired of asking. People move to Alaska for 2 reasons: to disappear or to survive something that nearly killed them. My reason was both. After my divorce, after the debts, after my father died and left me nothing but a cabin full of broken tools and colder memories, I found myself in a town that wasn't even on half the maps. A place where the mountains rose like jagged teeth and winter wasn't a season, just the constant state of things. The sign at the edge of town read, "Welcome to Clearleaf, population 312, on a good day." On a bad day, we were lucky to have 280. My job was simple. I was the night road watcher. The title sounds dramatic, but in a town this small, it mostly meant checking the back highway for moose, keeping an eye on the closed bridge so idiots didn't try crossing it at night, and responding if someone got stuck in a snowdrift. 90% boredom, 10% terror, but nothing, not moose, not storms, not frostbite, prepared me for what happened with the car, the one that appeared out of nowhere, the one with no tire tracks. It started around 4:12 a.m. on a February morning so cold the air tasted metallic. I was in the small roadside outpost, sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to the heater rattle like it had a lung condition. The highway cameras were glitching, flickering static over 2 of the feeds, but that wasn't unusual. Storms messed with them. Hell, the Aurora messed with them too. But then one camera, facing the long bend of Highway 7, cut out completely. Black screen. Then the motion alarm beeped. I looked out the outpost window toward the long stretch of road where the camera pointed. Even before I stepped outside, I saw something wrong. Headlights. A car sitting directly in the middle of the highway curve. Not moving, not idling, just there. I radioed in, procedure, but no one answered except static. The dispatcher was probably asleep. The town only paid for 1 overnight dispatcher, and she had a habit of resting her eyes. I grabbed my coat and flashlight and stepped outside. The cold punched me in the teeth. My eyelashes froze in under a minute as I made my way toward the car, boots crunching through the ice-crusted snow. The wind carried no sound, no engine, no voices, nothing, just the hum of electrical wires. When I reached the car, my breath snagged in my throat. It was a silver sedan, mid-2000s model, with the headlights still on. Snow dusted its hood and roof, but not enough to suggest it had been there long. But the road behind it was completely untouched, smooth, perfect, not a single tire track. The snow around the car was disturbed only by the wind. The sedan sat alone on the highway like it had dropped from the sky. I circled to the driver's side. The door was open. Not wide, just cracked, like someone had stepped out in a hurry. And inside the car, blood. Not splattered, not sprayed, handprints. 1 on the windshield, 2 on the inside of the driver's window, another smeared across the roof. Long streaks dragged toward the passenger seat. I leaned inside, trying not to touch anything, and found a wallet on the floor. The driver's license belonged to Mark Weber, age 42, from Idaho. The photo showed a smiling man with a receding hairline and tired but kind eyes. Not a local, not a neighbor, not someone who should have been on this road at 4 a.m. in a freezing Alaskan winter. A few items were still warm, the coffee in the cup holder, the battery pack on the passenger seat, so he couldn't have been gone long. But where the hell did he go? Mark? I called out. My voice died in the wind. Snowflakes whipped across my face as the road stretched silent into the dark woods. That's when I saw it. A trail. But not footprints. Just one long, winding drag mark, leading from the driver's door into the tree line. No footprints around it. No signs of a struggle. Just one long path carved through the fresh snow as if Mark had been pulled or crawled into the forest. My chest tightened. I radioed again. No answer. Protocol said to wait for backup, but backup lived 15 miles away, and the drag mark was getting partially covered by drifting snow. So I followed it. The path wound through the trees like a dying snake, weaving between trunks and shrubs. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. The wind faded, the forest stilled, even the distant hum of the highway disappeared. Only the crunch of my boots and my own breathing filled the air. After about 200 yards, the drag trail abruptly split. One direction veered left, the other right. Two trails, but only one body. I crouched and examined the snow. Both trails were fresh. Both were identical in shape. Both looked like something had been pulled through the snow in two directions at once. "Mark?" I yelled again. Nothing answered, except something whispered. Not words, not fully formed, a thin, sharp hiss that echoed deeper in the woods. I steadied my breathing and followed the right trail. I didn't get far. The trail ended abruptly at a tree trunk. Not beside it, on it. There, smeared across the bark, were bloody fingerprints. 5 long streaks dragged upward as if someone had clawed at the tree while being lifted off the ground. I felt my grip tighten on the flashlight. Something rustled in the branches above. Not like an animal, not like wind. A slow, deliberate shifting weight. I pointed my flashlight upward. The light caught nothing, but the branches were still moving. I took a slow step back. A second rustle came, this time behind me. I spun, flashlight shaking. Nothing. The forest was empty, dead, silent. I turned back toward the tree, and the bloody handprints were gone. Vanished, as if someone had wiped them clean. I took several steps backward, heart pounding so loud I felt it in my ears. I didn't want to be here. Every instinct told me to run. But before I turned back, something caught my eye. A shape between the trees, still, tall, watching. I lifted my flashlight, but the beam caught only falling snow. The shape was gone. I backed away until I reached the first fork in the trail. And that's when I noticed something I should have seen earlier. The two drag marks weren't identical. The snow inside one path was lightly disturbed. The snow inside the other was frozen solid, like someone had pressed dry ice into it. Whatever dragged Mark wasn't human. I ran back toward the highway so fast I nearly fell twice. When the outpost finally came into view, my lungs burned, my vision blurred, and my legs shook like I had frost sickness. The sedan was still there, lights on, driver's door open, blood drying in the cold. But something new had appeared. Under the car, a shape. At first I thought it was a shadow. Then I realized it was a figure, curled beneath the chassis like an animal hiding from the light. I approached slowly, hand hovering near the pistol on my belt. As I got closer, the shape moved, not crawling, not scooting. It slid like a puppet dragged by strings into a deeper shadow under the car. "Hello," I called, a mistake, because the figure didn't answer with words. It answered with breathing, slow, wet, wrong, like air being forced through a throat that wasn't made for lungs. I stepped back, the breathing got louder, then stopped. Something was waiting beneath the car, listening. I circled wide, keeping my flashlight aimed. The beam caught the black gap under the chassis, and for one fraction of a second, I saw eyes. Huge, sunken eyes, staring from the dark. Not human eyes. Too large, too reflective, as if they were catching light from a source that didn't exist. I staggered backward. The thing moved again, jerking, twitching, then went completely still. I ran for the outpost and locked myself inside. My radio finally crackled to life. "Station 7, this is dispatch. Do you copy?" I grabbed the mic so fast I nearly dropped it. "Send backup. Now. I have a missing driver and something is under the vehicle." The dispatcher answered, "Under what vehicle?" "The sedan on Highway 7. Static. Then her voice came back, confused. "There's no car reported on Highway 7. "There is now," I snapped. "Silver sedan, headlights on, Idaho plates." Another pause, longer this time. "Station 7, we just checked the highway cam." My stomach dropped. "Ann, there's nothing there." I froze. "What do you mean nothing?" "No car, no lights, just snow." "That's impossible. I'm looking at it right now." "No," the dispatcher whispered. "You're not." I leaned toward the outpost window. The sedan was gone. Just gone. In its place, the snow lay perfectly smooth. No tire tracks, no indentation. The headlights had vanished, the blood, the door marks, the shadow beneath, everything. The only sign anything had ever been there was a single line in the snow, a drag mark, fresh, leading back into the woods, leading toward me. I backed away from the window, heart hammering so violently I thought my ribs might crack. The radio crackled again. "Station 7, the dispatcher whispered. "Are you inside?" "Yes, stay there." "Then, whatever you do, do not open the door." Silence. The wind outside died. The outpost heater faltered, and from just outside the door I heard breathing. Slow, wet, wrong. Exactly like what I heard under the car. Then something pressed against the door, hard. The door hinges groaned. Something scraped the wood, long claws, dragging. I grabbed my pistol, aimed at the door, and prayed backup was coming. The breathing stopped, and a voice whispered through the cracks of the door. A voice cracked, trembling, impossibly familiar. A help, Mark, or whatever was left of him. Help me. I held still, frozen, because the voice wasn't coming from the height of a standing man. It was coming from ground level, like something was crouched or crawling, or pressed against the door with its mouth inches from the floor. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I waited inside that outpost for nearly an hour before backup arrived. By the time they reached me, the drag mark outside the door was frozen solid. The woods were silent, and whatever had come out of the forest was gone. The official report said the driver likely crashed somewhere else and wandered into the woods. They said the car tracks were buried by wind. They said I hallucinated under stress. They said a lot of things. None of them were true. Because 3 nights later, just before dawn, I got a text from an unknown number, just like the one the store clerk in the next town once got. A photo of the outpost, taken from outside, and under the outpost door, right where the gap touched the snow, was the shape of a face, pressed into the frost. Wide, unblinking eyes, mouth open, silent, watching, waiting for me to open the door. Because whatever dragged Mark into those woods didn't leave. It just learned how to hide. I grew up in a place where winters lasted 9 months, and children learned to read by the flickering light of diesel generators. Our school was small, 3 classrooms, 1 hallway, and a basement that everyone pretended didn't exist. They said it used to store coal for the old furnace. They said it was sealed off due to mold. They said a lot of things, but no one talked about the hatch. Not in front of kids, anyway. I only learned about it because I started working as the winter night custodian when I turned 20, long after most people my age left town behind. I needed the job. I needed something to keep me from thinking about everything else. My father dying on the fishing boats, my mother leaving, the kind of loneliness that clings to your ribs in places this isolated. They gave me keys, instructions, and one rule. Never open the hatch. Never go near it. If you hear knocking, call Frank. Don't investigate. Frank was the old maintenance guy, retired Army, quiet, eyes like a man who had seen something he wished he could forget. When he said the rule, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't even sound dramatic. He just sounded tired. I laughed nervously, thinking it was some small-town initiation ritual meant to spook the new guy. But his expression didn't change. "I'm serious," he said. "If you hear knocking, stop what you're doing and call me. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to open it. Understand?" I nodded. I didn't understand. Not then. The hatch was in the basement, at the farthest end, past the janitor's closet and old mop sinks. A square metal door bolted into the floor with rusted hinges, and a heavy chain looped through it like someone tried to keep something inside. Or outside. The first few weeks were nothing. I waxed floors, checked classrooms, replaced light bulbs, and swept the hallways while the building groaned around me under the weight of cold. Sometimes I'd hear kids laughing in my head, phantom echoes from the daytime, but that was normal. Schools absorb sound like sponges, nothing unusual, nothing scary, until the knocking started. It was the first week of December. Temperatures plunged to 40 below. Frost coated the inside of the windows like spiderwebs. The generator lights flickered so often it looked like the building was breathing. I had just finished cleaning the main hallway when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow taps from the basement. I stopped sweeping. The building settled. I tried convincing myself it was the pipes, or the furnace, or my imagination. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Slower, heavier, like someone rapping their knuckles against metal from deep underground. I stood frozen in the hallway, broom in hand, listening. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable. I swallowed, remembering Frank's words. Never open the hatch, never investigate, call him. So I did. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the late hour. You heard it, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I whispered. What do you want me to? Stay upstairs, he said. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Then he hung up. I waited. The knocking continued every few minutes, irregular, as if whoever or whatever was below the hatch had no concept of time. When Frank finally arrived, bundled in a heavy coat and carrying a lantern instead of a flashlight, he walked past me without a word. He descended into the basement, lantern swinging, boots thudding against the old wooden steps. The knocking stopped. Silence filled the school. I didn't move until he came back up 15 minutes later, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. It's quiet now, he said. What is it? I asked. He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I saw fear in his eyes. You don't want to know. Then he walked out. I should have quit that night. But curiosity is a sickness, a slow, creeping disease that convinces you danger is manageable as long as you understand it. A week passed, no sounds. I convinced myself it had been a fluke. Then winter vacation came, and the school emptied. No kids, no teachers, no noise. Just me in a silent building for 8 hours each night. On the third night of break, the lights flickered again. Off, on, off, on. A gust of warm air blew up from the basement stairs. Wrong, unnatural warmth. Then, knock, knock, knock. Except this time, it wasn't faint. It echoed through the entire building like a drumbeat. I grabbed my phone and dialed Frank. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Come on, I whispered. Come on, come on. The third call went straight to voicemail. A cold spike of dread plunged through my stomach. The knocking grew louder, slow, deliberate. I crept toward the basement door. The air felt thicker, warmer, as if the building itself was sweating. When I reached the top of the stairs, I smelled something strange. Earth, damp earth, like freshly dug soil. And beneath it, something else, something metallic. The knocking stopped. Then a voice rose from below, a voice I recognized. My mother's. Aaron, it called faintly. Sweetheart, help me. My breath caught. She had been gone for years. She left Alaska when I was 15, no forwarding address, no goodbye. Just gone. But that voice was her. I stepped down 2 stairs before my brain caught up to my body. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. Aaron, the voice whispered again, closer, too close, directly beneath the floor. I backed up the stairs, heart hammering, hand shaking so violently on the railing I nearly slipped. I called Frank again, voicemail. Another knock rattled the basement walls. Then something dragged across the hatch, a long, slow scraping sound that vibrated up through the floor. It sounded like nails or bones. I ran out of the building. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about my job. I sprinted across the snow-packed parking lot and didn't stop running until I reached the old supply depot where the night guard stayed. He let me in, listened to me babble out everything, then radioed Frank. This time, Frank answered. Not with words, with a single shaky breath. When he arrived at the school 20 minutes later, he looked older, exhausted, terrified of something he refused to name. We went inside. The school felt colder, harder, wrong, like the air had thickened into something heavy enough to crush lungs. Somewhere in the distance, a soft knocking resumed. Fainter now, almost playful. Frank turned to me. You need to go home. No, I said. Tell me what's under there. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked defeated. The tunnel wasn't built by us, he said quietly. It wasn't built for storage. It wasn't part of the original construction. Then who built it? He shook his head once, subtly. Not who, he whispered. What? My skin crawled. What's down there? He didn't speak for several seconds. Then, something that remembers voices. A cold shiver ran through my spine. What do you mean? It hears us, he said. It mimics us. It listens through the pipes and the floorboards. It waits until it learns the voice it wants. Hears us for what? He swallowed. To call us. We stood in silence as the faint voice, my mother's voice, rose again from the basement. Soft, broken. Aaron, it's so cold. I felt tears sting my eyes. That's not her, Frank said sharply. Whatever you hear, it's never who it sounds like. How do you know? He turned toward me slowly, fear hollowing his face. Because before it learned your mother's voice, it used mine. My stomach dropped. You? He nodded. It called me by name for years, mimicked my father, mimicked my wife. I nearly opened that hatch twice. Why didn't you? He took a shaky breath. Because I looked under the hatch once. My mouth went dry. What did you see? His eyes glazed over, staring at something far in the past. Hands, he whispered. Too many hands, reaching up through the dirt, as if the tunnel isn't full of bodies, but something wearing the shape of bodies. A chill ripped through me so violently my ribs ached. He lowered his voice. And it doesn't want out, it wants us in. We didn't stay in the school. We left that night, locking the doors behind us. The district claimed structural issues. Kids came back to class 2 weeks later with no mention of the basement. But the knocking didn't stop. Not for me. It followed me home. Some nights it came from the pipes, some nights from beneath the floorboards, some nights from directly outside my bedroom window, soft tapping like someone trying to get my attention. One night at 2:17 a.m., I got a phone call from an unknown number. I answered. My mother's voice whispered, "Aaron, open the door." I hung up and blocked the number. It called again. Different number, same voice, different tone, angrier, hungrier. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I went to the school. The hatch was gone. The district had cemented over the basement floor, sealed the entire lower level, claimed it was a long overdue safety upgrade. But I knew the truth. You can seal a tunnel, you can bury a door, but you can't bury a voice. Not when the thing beneath the school has already learned yours. Not when it whispers your name in the wind. Not when you hear tapping on your window at night, soft, patient, persistent. Because something under that school is still calling me, still waiting, still learning. And every winter, when the ground freezes deep enough to carry sound farther, the knocking comes back, closer, clearer, more confident. One day I know it won't just knock. It will knock the way it did the night I first heard it, 3 times. Slow, deliberate, as if saying, I've learned your voice, now learn mine. And when that day comes, I don't think a locked door will be enough. Most people who've never lived in Alaska think they understand isolation. They don't. Not until they've seen a winter where daylight is a rumor and the wind carries voices that no living thing ever made. I grew up in a settlement called Silverjaw. You won't find it on the map. A cluster of cabins, one frozen dirt road, a snow-buried water tower, and a radio repeater that barely worked even in summer. Maybe 60 people lived there. Fewer stayed long enough for me to know them. But we all knew the same rule. If you hear the howling, don't check outside. If it sounds like it's coming from inside your house, don't move. That rule kept a lot of people alive. It didn't keep my neighbor alive. It didn't keep my brother alive. And it sure as hell didn't keep me sane. The first time I heard the howling, I was 11. It was a night so cold the boards of our cabin snapped like bones under tension. The wind outside was screaming, rattling the window panes so hard I thought they'd burst. But under that wind, something else rose. A long, low howl. Not an animal sound. I want to be very clear. This had none of the rhythm of a wolf, none of the cadence of a dog, none of the resonance of a person. It was something stretched out, unnatural, like someone dragging a bow across a cello string soaked in ice. The sound filled the whole cabin. My father froze. My mother grabbed my arm so tightly her nails broke skin. Then the howl shifted, sliding in pitch like it was moving around the room. Inside the walls. My father whispered, "Don't move, don't breathe." We stayed frozen like that for almost a minute. Then the sound faded. No explanation, no footprints outside, no broken window, nothing. In the morning, my father hammered long nails into the wall seams and stapled canvas over them. He told me the wind had found a loose board, and that was what I heard. But I had seen the look in his eyes. He didn't believe that. He was protecting me from something he didn't want to speak aloud. The howling didn't return for years. I grew up thinking it was a childhood memory warped by fear. My father died on the fishing rig when I was 17. My mother moved south. I stayed. Silverjaw is one of those towns that feels like it's glued to your bones. You can leave, but the place doesn't leave you. I got a job repairing cabins, mostly patching damage from storms or wildlife. The biggest issue was always insulation. Cold air slips through everything up here. Walls breathe, floors flex, doors expand and crack. But some houses didn't just breathe. Some houses sounded like they were alive. The first real sign came from Mrs. Avery's place. She was 92, half-blind, and stubborn as a glacier. I'd checked on her often, since her nearest family lived thousands of miles away. On a particularly cold January night, I found her sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. "What's wrong?" I asked. She pointed a shaking finger at the wood paneling. "It's in the walls again," she whispered. "Moving, listening." I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. Just the faint creak of settling timber. But her face, I'd never seen anyone look so afraid. The next morning she was dead. Heart attack, they said. Except her body was found half-crawled under the bed, as if she'd been trying to hide from something. And the wall beside her bed had splinter marks, tiny scratches, like something inside had tried to claw its way out. Nobody talked about it. Nobody questioned it. People in Silverjaw don't ask questions they're scared to learn the answers to. Winter deepened. Temperatures dropped below -40. Frost patterns formed on the inside of windows, twisting shapes that looked almost like fingers dragging down the glass. And then the howling came back. Not outside, inside my house. The night it started, I was lying in bed reading by lantern light when I heard it. A slow, trembling moan rising from the floorboards beneath me. I sat upright. The sound swelled, vibrating the mattress. I pressed my hand to the wooden boards and felt it, a pulse, a tremor, as if something was moving inside the structure of the house. The howling climbed in pitch until it became a shuddering wail. It echoed through the walls, through the beams, through the air itself. Every hair on my body stood on end. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. Then footsteps, not above me, not outside, inside the walls. A slow, dragging gait, something with weight, scraping along the interior like a man forced to crawl inside a coffin. The footsteps moved from the left wall to the right, toward the door. Then stopped, directly behind the door. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. The doorknob trembled, just once. Then the howling returned, soft, almost like a whimper. My eyes watered from fear. After 10 unbearable minutes, the sound faded, and the cabin went silent. The next day I checked the outside walls. No damage, no footprints, no openings, but the inside of the walls told a different story. I found scratched marks on the inner paneling after removing a loose board. Long vertical gouges spaced in irregular patterns like fingers too long and joints too far apart. I showed the marks to the town constable, a man named Orrin who had lived there longer than anyone. He didn't look surprised. He looked angry. "You don't open walls in winter," he snapped. "Seal it back, now." "Something's living in here," I said quietly. "Nothing's living in your walls," he muttered. "Nothing alive, anyway." That was the closest thing to an admission anyone ever gave me. I resealed the wall. I didn't sleep that night. The next incident happened 3 days later. Snow fell hard, thick flakes piling against every door. I was inside making coffee when I heard a faint tapping above me. Tap, 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 slow, methodical. It came from the attic. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the narrow ladder. The air got colder the higher I went, as if the temperature dropped 10 degrees in the span of 6 feet. When I reached the attic hatch, I pressed my ear to it. Silence. Then tap, 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 followed by a low moan. I swallowed hard and pushed the hatch open. The attic was empty, dark, dusty. Frozen air swept past my face, prickling my skin with needles of ice. I stepped inside, sweeping the flashlight beam across boxes, tools, old fishing gear. Nothing. Then I heard breathing. Behind me. Slow, wet, awkward. I turned the light. Nothing. But the dust on the attic floor was disturbed. A long line dragged straight through it. Not footprints, just one long streak. As if something long and thin had slid across the floor, weaving around boxes, moving in impossible patterns. I followed the drag marks until they reached the far wall. There, carved into the wood, were deep gouges, 5 of them, like something had pressed a hand or claws into the boards and pulled itself downward. I ran out of the attic so fast I nearly fell off the ladder. That night, I nailed the hatch shut, but the howling came back anyway. The worst night of my life was the night my brother died. He lived 4 cabins down, a hunter, tough as steel, no stranger to cold or fear. He called me around 2 a.m. His voice was shaking. Something's in my walls. My blood went cold. It's howling, he whispered. Not outside, inside. It's moving around the house, Eric. I grabbed my coat. I'm coming over. No, he said quickly. You can't. It knows I called you. It stopped moving. Stay away from the walls, I told him. Stay in the middle of the room. Don't open anything. Then the phone cut off. I ran. I don't remember putting on boots. I don't remember leaving my cabin. I just remember sprinting through the snow, lungs burning, heart pounding, eyes on his cabin door. The moment I reached it, I heard the howling, louder than I had ever heard it, louder than the storm outside. It vibrated the cabin. It made the ground tremble. It sounded like 1,000 voices layered into one monstrous cry. I kicked the door open. My brother was on the floor, his face pale, his eyes wide, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. I dropped to my knees beside him, sobbing, shaking him, begging him to breathe. He didn't. I tried CPR. Nothing. I tried screaming for help. Nothing. Then I saw the wall beside him. The wood was bulging outward, swollen like something inside was pressing against it. The bulge moved, shifted, slid upward. A shape pressed against the timber, long fingers stretching the wood outward. Then, the howling stopped. The wall snapped back into place. Silence fell. My brother was gone, and there was nothing I could do. The town buried him quietly. Nobody said the word howling. Nobody said something inside the walls. Nobody admitted what really happened. The constable pulled me aside after the service. His face looked older. "I'm sorry," he said softly. I stared at him. "You knew this could happen," he didn't argue. "You've lived here long enough," he said. "You've heard it. You've seen what it does. You need to leave." "Leave," I whispered. "And let it kill someone else?" He lowered his gaze. "It doesn't follow people south, only north." "What does that mean?" He exhaled slowly. "It's part of this place, part of these winters. The cold keeps it alive. The dark gives it room to move. You can't fight it. You can't stop it. All you can do is deny it." "Deny what?" "That it exists." He walked away before I could say another word. I lasted 2 more nights in my cabin. Each night, the howling got louder. Each night, the footsteps inside the walls came closer. Each night, the breathing grew heavier. On the final night, I woke to a sound inches from my pillow, a long exhale pressed against the wood that separated my head from whatever was inside the wall. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my pack, my rifle, and my keys. I left everything else behind. I drove south, 50 miles, 100 miles, 200, until the cold lessened and the trees grew thick again. The howling didn't follow, but sometimes I wake up at night with my heart pounding and my breath shallow, because I swear I hear it faintly, muffled, distant, like it remembers me, like it's looking for another way in, like it's learned that walls are only as strong as the people who trust them. And one day, when winter is long enough and the nights are dark enough, it might find me again. Because whatever lives inside those houses in Silverjaw, it isn't trapped. It's hunting, and it never howls for no reason.